Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. Right, so yesterday we made a video about 10 almost great champions that Kabam has released in the recent years, but all of them ended up lacking something to become kind of like mainstay, regularly used champions. They're still obviously good and usable, but you know, they're not at the top of the game. They're not tier 1 war champions. They're not battlegrounds kind of deck staples and stuff like that. But one of the most important conditions for that video was that those champions had to be the ones that have never received a buff. And that was for a good reason, because today we are going to be talking about champions that did get a buff. And the buff wasn't, you know, complete failure or complete waste of time, because we have had those as well where the buffs were effectively meaningless. And today we're going to be talking about 10 buffed champions that I think were this close to becoming like really great and amazing. Obviously, as I said, we have our success stories with Juggernaut, Hulk, Kingpin, Magneto, so on and so forth, and then there are obviously complete waste of time stories as well with a ton of champions. And there is this one infographic as well that was pieced together by JX. Here we can see all the buffs throughout the years where, you know, the first couple of more buffs were absolutely useless for sure, and then we can see that you know, Iron Patriot actually has apparently received a buff in 2016, which was a bit of a useless thing, and so on and so forth. So a bunch of these definitely have been utterly garbage and unsuccessful. Few of them have been extremely amazing, and then there is a lot of them that looked quite promising but didn't quite make it. So let's go to it. I think War Machine, after the buff, is a really good champion. And here we're gonna probably get into disagreement with some people who do not necessarily see the things my way, but realistically, if a champion has level 2, level 3 rotation, it's just too slow. Regardless of what anybody wants to tell you, damage matters a lot. Below a certain level of damage, the champion will basically never be popular or used frequently if he just does not hit hard enough. You might have the best utilities in the world, but if you're too slow, it doesn't matter in majority of the cases. And then there's going to be this other group who's going to tell, yeah, but he's good in like longer fights and stuff like that. Guess what? You do longer fights 1% of the time, realistically. You do Alliance Quest daily, Alliance War daily, you do casual questing inside events, you do battlegrounds, you do whatever else. 8% plus fights that you do are short, relatively short, medium level fights. And then when the long fights do come along, you know, obviously it's great to have champions that perform well in long fights, but that realistically consists of like 1%. Like, if you put percentage-wise, how many Abyss fights have you had in last month, and how many Alliance Quest fights have you had in last month? Now, how often those things get used? And then on top of it all, it's not like that champions that are good in short fights will automatically be bad in long fights. We have plenty of champions like, I don't know, Kitties, Herculeses, and Human Torches and Nick Furies that are good in long and short fights. So if a champion is only good in a long fight, it's just never going to work out as a kind of like really popular, successful thing. That's it. If you see a rotation where you need to go to like level 2, level 3, and then do some, that's it. It's a fail automatically. And I can't believe that Kabam hasn't really properly grasped this up until now. To a point where, like, if your champion needs to get to a level 3 in like any fight, you pretty much should give them some extra ability to get there quicker, some sort of power gain, combat power rate increase, or something. And War Machine doesn't have any of it. Therefore, you know, enter the fight, build up to level 2, then, you know, build up to another level 2 while dropping some heavy attack, and then, yeah, drop that level 3, and he's going to be doing great damage. It's just not quite quick enough. Now, obviously, since he was released as a 7-star champion, that does kind of help a lot, because if your most champions are like rank 3s and rank 4s, and then we have a War Machine that's effectively at a level of rank 5, obviously he becomes comparatively faster. But ultimately, I think it was a good buff with his abilities, with, you know, removal of prowess, his combat power rate alteration on level 1, and access to raptures, and then armor breaks, and his pre-fights. All of that's very good stuff. He could have been a very, very good champ if they just gave him some sort of shorter damage rotation. That's all they needed to do. Moving on, Yondu. It's kind of a similar thing. And Yondu obviously gets his damage largely from his level 2, where for each special attack that the opponent has launched in this fight, he gains a passive Fury, maximum of 3, and it lasts for 14 seconds. But the thing is that Fury is just kind of not necessarily long enough. And then his base damage, his bleeds, just do not trigger like enough. We have characters like Nick Fury where, finish every combo, get like a massive bleed and a light, and then we have a whole bunch of other champions that just proc these bleeds much, much more frequently. And then with Yondu, we still have 40% chance to inflict bleed, dealing, decent-ish damage over 7 seconds. But it's just not high enough, I would say. If he inflicted more bleeds and if that Fury lasted longer, he would be a very good champion. He would be used much more frequently. But he doesn't, which kind of sucks. And an additional thing that kind of annoys me is that he got his armor stealing mechanic. And then that armor stealing mechanic, here we go, 25% chance to pilfer 1 armor buff, plus chance to pilfer 1 prowess effect. For each prowess or armor pilfered, gain armor buff. They surely should have given, if you pilfer armor, you gain an armor buff. If you pilfer prowess, give him a prowess buff so he gets, some very preferred matchups against mutants. So this thing I don't like, that regardless of whether you're stealing opponent's prowesses or armor, so you gain armor, they could have given him just those prowesses that he's pilfering. And then, just make this Fury last like 20 seconds. I think that would be much more reasonable. And give him slightly more chance to bleed, and we would have a very, very solid tech champion. But as it is right now, he just isn't. Just is not good enough. Moving on, Silver Warrior. And Silver Warrior buff really frustrated me. And he does have his use. There are some good things about him, but the stupidest thing was that they actually took away quite a bit of versatility that Silver Warrior had. And the most annoying thing is that they are so close to making this champion great. And the only problem that they really have is that you have to go armor ups or Furies. And instead of having this whole dash back and convert your armor ups into Furies mechanic, they could have left this with dash back and you can like refresh your armor ups or something. And they could have given just attack increase to this guy based on armor rating. Kind of like Colossus has or a bunch of other champions. The Fury buffs just never needed to enter this conversation. And that alone would make him a good champion. Just the more armor ups you have, the harder you hit. That's it. Good. Sorted. Obviously, you could go either ways around it as well, like increase the duration of those Fury buffs, but that still wouldn't really solve one of the main problems here, whether you maintain your utility that you gain by accumulating armor buffs, or you go for damage, and then even when you go for damage, it's very hard and tricky to maintain it. So instead, just let him do damage as he ramps up by gaining more armor ups. And we would have an amazing beast mode of a Silver Warrior. As it is right now, unfortunately, regardless of how cool he looks, he just doesn't do quite enough for the effort required, I would say. Okay. Next up, one of my personal favorites, and it's Carnage. And I do think that Kabam did a great job when it comes to making Carnage feel awesome. Like he's a menace. He's one of the favorite champions for me to play in the game. And the reason for it is like spamming special attacks, inflicting a ton of debuffs, seeing a ton of red numbers on opponent ticking away, and then, gaining buffs and being super aggressive and still reasonably big yellow numbers on a champion. All of that is extremely feel good. The only problem with him is he just doesn't do anything. Like, if you don't look at, damage as utility, then, well, he has, like, zero utility. All of his abilities are just circling around more damage. There's no immunities. He doesn't gain any bonuses against either champions or anything like that. And, he has bleed and power gain. That's it. And absolutely nothing else. Could have given him just a little bit of something else. I love the guy. He's very cool, but him, being a ramp-up character that does require max deep wounds and having zero utility means that he will forever remain just that, like a very, very, very fun champion that was very close to being great, but just isn't. He just does not do enough. They needed to give him some more of that symbiote juice that they have showed Venom and Venom Pool, immune to power control, so he can do Penny Parkers or something, and some other, I don't know, immunities or some bits of utility by Divas. Something. Nope. So, the champion that's basically just raw damage, that's ramp up, and not even that high amount of damage. It's not like he can't be out damaged, especially in the short fights. So yeah, just not quite enough there. Moving on, Guillotine. And Guillotine possibly was the most disappointing situation Kabam had ever created. Kabam made this whole big, massive fuss about summoners voting for which champion do we want to get buffed. And even though I didn't support Guillotine, I always thought that she's a cool character. And she won the vote. And everybody was so excited for Guillotine's buff, and she's hardly any better than she used to be. And then they did buff her like the second time by increasing her regeneration by a tiny bit, but it just is not good enough. And again, she's a very, very cool character. I love using Guillotine. I have her as rank 3 as well. I actually think I have all of these champions at rank 3 so far. Yeah. So far, all the champions mentioned I have taken to rank 3, but again, there's a very good reason why I haven't taken them to rank 4, despite having more than enough chances to do so. And with Guillotine, again, it just feels like she's kind of undertuned a bit, not enough utility, not that regen isn't quite potent enough to be very cool. The regen's potent enough if you have some massive damage modifiers, I would say, but that's about it. And other than that, she just doesn't do much. She just has that level 2 Spectre debuff, which, let's face it, is worse version of Petrify. Petrify also does the regen reversal and power reversal. And then, the pain link mechanic does absolutely nothing offensively, might as well not exist there. And then there's nothing else going on. Regen and Spectre. These are like two things that are going on for her. And even with that, she still could have been a cool character if that regen was better, if she procced bleeds more. They actually reduced the chance to proc the bleed, I think, compared to what she used to have. And, just increase, just have 100% chance to inflict bleed debuff and crits. Like, it wouldn't be that OP, And I think she would be very cool if she bled opponents more often, if her regen was very important. It had maybe a tiny bit of extra utility instead of this useless pain link level 1. Be very, very cool. And yeah, she does have that cool factor. She's an MCOC original. She is a very special champion in the game. She looks very cool. She feels very smooth to play. And despite all of the shortcomings that she currently has, I still kind of enjoy the champion. It's just that she's not good enough. That's the problem. Let's move on. Daredevil Hell's Kitchen. Yes, I know you guys are going to rage about this one, but listen up. Daredevil Hell's Kitchen has a lot of redeeming qualities going on for him. The problem is that he's kind of like jack of all trades, master of none, and just, again, not enough damage here. For instance, in Styx Apprentice, while in this mode, attacks reduce the damage of the opponent's passive degeneration and direct damage effects back by 50 to 100%. This is awesome, right? This is a very, very cool ability. It's kind of like Omega Red's Tentacles, lets you do Electros and whatnot. But this could be in the base kit, so you don't need to get him to Sig 200 for it to work properly. Right? And then the rest of his abilities, again, just seem that they were a bit too undertuned. Base regeneration rate is set at 40%, so he basically offs himself if you're running recall masteries, but at the same time we have champions like Kingpins and Diablos and whatnot who have more potent regen rates with 100% uptime on debuffs all the time, and he, just doesn't. This definitely could be increased so you could run recoil with him for sure. And then, give him a bit more critical rating. Make attacks that reduce opponent's defensive ability accuracy by 65%. Just ump it up a bit. Ump these numbers a bit, and I bet he would be a good champion. And the one problem that he has, though, that no numbers could fix, is just cut his special one in half. Just special one animation, we need like 1/3 of it. Special 2 is fine, heavy attack's fine, everything else fine, but special 1 animation, just use like 1/3 of it. How many hits it is? It's like 7 hits or something like that. And they are slow hits. It just looks very wonky. It looks like, I don't know, a horse trying to dance some swan ballet. It just doesn't feel right. And it wastes everybody's time. But besides that, just give him slightly better numbers, move some abilities around. He would be very, very good champion. He has defensive ability accuracy reduction, just not potent enough. He can ignore damage back from like electrodes and killmongers and stuff like that, but that requires max sig, which kind of sucks. He does have access to furies that don't quite last long enough, or maybe are not necessarily potent enough. Just up him up a bit, and he would be a good champion. And cut that level 1 by 2/3. Make it 2 hits or something would be good. Next up is Spidey. And Spidey buff is growing on me, and I have a duped 7-star, and I do think that a lot of people are too harsh on the guy. It might still turn out that Spidey is undeservedly on this list, and eventually we're going to see him shine. But ultimately, I do think that Spidey buff is still better than a lot of people think, just not quite good enough, especially for such an iconic character as Spider-Man. And again, I have heard the defenses of some of these buffs is like, some of these buffs are not intended for endgame players or something like that, and we want them to be simple. And it's like, and that's fine. But here's the thing, it doesn't matter whether you're an endgame player or a low tier player, you want to use strong champions. You can have a champion be extremely powerful and be simple. You have champions like Archangel, parry heavy, wow, how hard is that to use, but it's still one of the most powerful things in the game. Right? It's not like Hercules is something that's super complex to use, or I don't know, Nick Fury or whatever. Even though they have many abilities, they're still super easy to use, and all the new players still use them. But they are also powerful champions. So plenty of powerful champions that are extremely straightforward and simple. Just look up here at the top of like Warlock. There's nothing hard about using Warlock. Any new player can pick up Warlock and run with it. And Warlock is a strong champion. So making it buff, quote unquote, for new players is absolutely no excuse making it, any less powerful than top tier players could appreciate. And then the problem with Spidey is just, what's the best way to describe it? I don't want to say it's a bit too slow. It just doesn't come together, I'd say, as much as you'd want it to come together. Because we're in a situation where if you want to use the utility, you need to spam the level 1s first and kind of forego the damage if you want to access whatever utility he has. And if you want to go for damage, you basically ignore all utility and get moderate amount of damage, but for full amount of damage, you still need to spam those level 1s. And I'm not entirely sure what the solution there would be, but, well, in ideal circumstances, I suppose, just give him a little bit of power gain so he can gain those special attacks quicker. I think that would be super helpful. For instance, every time you inflict count on opponent, get like a bit of power or something. So you can drop your level 1s, and level 2s quicker if you're being like super aggressive with him, so you can get your rotations in faster. Overall, I do like him as a character after the buff, and it is growing on me again. I did end up duping my 7-star, and he's not bad. I just don't think he's quite great either compared to how stacked Science Class is. think just a little bit more to this guy, and he could have been amazeballs. Moving on, it's kind of similar to SpiderGwen. SpiderGwen is another champion that I do have at rank 3 for a relatively long time, and I just never find a reason to take her to rank 4. For a long time, I was also wanting to rank 3 her, but I never did because she was always one of those would be nice type of champions. I like a lot of her abilities. I like what she does. It is satisfying to use her. She's just not quite there. And that mainly has to do with her ramp up as well. If she would start with the penny synergy included, like she's pretty much fully ramped up, I think a lot more people would be using SpiderGwen because she'd be much more faster. But it is what it is. It's a champion that I have always, well, after her buff, because pre-buff version of SpiderGwen was an absolute meme. But after her buff, I always liked her. I enjoyed her. I think she's cool. She's just not quite fast enough, not quite enough to make it, up there in the game. But given how relatively old this buff is, I think it's held up together quite decent. Moving on, Yellow Jacket. And Yellow Jacket is possibly the biggest champion, possibly the closest we had to an amazing champion. With his stats of energy resistance, physical resistance, and also relatively large amounts of utility, it's a great concept. It really is. And there is just one problem with Yellow Jacket. Well, two problems. There are two problems with Yellow Jacket. The number one problem with Yellow Jacket is the damage. It just isn't enough. Again, compared to how many awesome science champions we have at the moment in the game, it just doesn't stack up to, Mr. Negatives, Eye Bombs, Joe Fixit, Scorpions, Torches, Spots, Spider Hams that do power gains, or Cassie Langs and stuff like that. Just a bit too slow. And then in longer fights, he might be decent-ish, but you need him at max sig, basically. And the other problem is obviously that he's like only champion in the game that has access to Power Sting or similar effect, but doesn't have some sort of Taunt or Infuriate. We have Cassie, there's Taunt. We have Spider-Ham, there's Taunt. I think Ant-Man, even if he's still on this list, there's Taunt as well. So he has all of these power things, but it's just at such a mercy from AI. And then even if you do get your power things off, they're just not quite potent enough compared to Spider-Ham, to Cassie, whatnot. Very good. I love that he has access to Petrify. I love that he has access to Slow. I love his resistances. So many things I think are very, very cool. His damage mitigation mechanics and everything else. Just not fast enough. Moving on, Ant-Man. And Ant-Man's again one of those buffs again. There's a ton of cool things happening with him, and I really like whatever he does. But the problem is, he just does it too slow. It's quite finicky to play him to get go, but it's just too slow. It just is. If he was faster, if he was slightly bit faster, he would be a very popular champion. And this is still yet and time again. If you're going to create a champion that has these, level 1, level 2, and then you start doing damage rotations, or and without any help of getting to those special attacks, and without having like a super smooth playstyle, it will just never catch on. It's not quite as big of an offense here as War Machine is, where it's level 2, level 3. That's literally the worst rotation I think I have seen on any champion. You need like 7 power bars in order to unlock. Well, I mean Wong, but at least Wong has power again. But yeah, it's just never going to work. As long as Kabam keep making champions that do not have extra power gain or combat power rate and have like level 2, whatever rotations, it will never work in this game because it's too slow. Because it will matter in 1% of the fights that we do. Because 99% of the fights that we are doing are relatively quick-paced fights. Whether people like to admit it or not, it just is. Alliance Quest, Alliance War, Battlegrounds, casual questing, and monthly event, side event, stuff like that. You use champions that finish out fights quick because you don't have all day to do side quests. or you do not want to do Alliance quest for 3 hours a day. And if a champion's too slow, you know, nobody at large will use him. When I say nobody at large, I don't mean that there will be nobody at all. I'm just saying that player base at large will not use those champions. Obviously, if Ant-Man's your favorite champion, go ahead and run him everywhere. It's just, you know, significantly less effective way to get there. And Iceman as well is a champion that I actually do quite like the buff, and I did test him about. Maybe similar to Spidey. I will move him up to a point where I'm quite happy with him. But yeah, I just don't think it was quite enough. Don't think it was quite enough. And the problem here is the Iceman buff has like one very big problem. It is super crit reliant. They reduced the reliance of RNG by increasing his chance to apply frostbites and stuff like that, and that is great. The problem is, all of those are still tied to critical hits. And let me explain why Iceman, you know, is nowhere near as powerful as he initially appeared to me. So what are like the, you know, matchups that you would want to kind of like use Iceman against? Let's go in skill class. Right? We could technically go against, I don't know, Korg, right? Where's Korg? Where is that chunky rock guy? Here we go. And Korg has 675 crit resistance. Iceman will crit significantly less against Korg. You could use him against like Killmonger. Killmonger has crit resistance. And so many of the best matchups where you would want to use Iceman, it just does not quite work out like that. You know, it's either because of them shrug offs and you can't maintain your frostbite, so you don't necessarily have to, but crit resistance is becoming a bigger and bigger thing, and it really does slow you down at large. Obviously, you can still get through those fights, you're just not going to be as fast as you would be otherwise. And then if you go and check out the champion list, you're going to see that many of the champions that have crit resistance are some of the, you know, rougher champions to deal with. Then obviously some built-in crit resistance and stuff like that. And yeah, I do find him not matching up too well against the more meta defenders currently, I would say. I really do like the buff though. But yeah, should have just given him some precision, something, so it's kind of a little bit less reliant on how many crits you can land, because sometimes it just goes horribly wrong. Anyways, but you know, there might still be hope for Iceman. Anyways, that is it, so I can go over them again quickly. So we have War Machine, we have Yondu, we have Steel Warrior, Carnage, Guillotine, Daryl Hell's Kitchen, Spidey, SpiderGwen, Yellow Jacket, Ant-Man, and Iceman, and this final one's not. So there you go. These are the champions that I think are almost amazing champions, just not quite there. Doesn't mean they're not great, as in like for you, if you like them, you can still use them, obviously. You know, as I said before, I absolutely love playing with Carnage. It's just I'm not lying to myself thinking that Carnage is the hottest shit out there. No, there are many better cosmic champions than Carnage. I just find him fun. You know, and that's the difference. And all of these champions can be used and you can clear content with them for sure. But none of them are like the best option for something specific. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, hit that like button, hit that sub button, hit all the good buttons, and I shall catch you guys soon. Bye-bye! Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about